Instruction, golf news, equipment, travel, interviews, course profiles, and more. Your weekly fix of all things golf is about to begin. It's the Flagstick Podcast with your hosts, Jeff Potter and Scott McLeod. Well, welcome golfers to another episode of the Flagstick Podcast, brought to you by TaylorMade Golf Canada, introducing Stealth with carbon face for better energy transfer and more ball speed. Welcome to the Carbonwood age. To learn more, visit tailormadegolf.ca. Well, I am one of your hosts, Jeff Potter, and with me in every podcast is my good friend, Scott McLeod. How are you today, Scott?
I'm doing okay, man. I'm doing okay. Looking forward to today and what we have in store for our listeners and viewers.
Yeah, I look forward to this every week now. It's one of those things, Sunday night, we're looking over all of our notes of the things that we want to talk about and, setting the lay of the land for the show. And then I really look forward to getting started the following day or within the next couple of days and getting started on the show. It's a lot of fun to have the Monday morning or the Tuesday morning conversations and record them and play them for people. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's been good, and certainly want to thank people for all the support in the first month. Having great ratings on Chartable, and then obviously seeing the uptake on Apple Podcasts, even Audible. That's kind of been a fun kind of thing there, and then gradually building our YouTube audience there as well. So I think people are enjoying the clips. I actually was playing golf on the weekend and had yes, oh I was. And,
Finally, one of us played.
Yeah, and I was standing by the first tee, and I had a member came over and said, "Hey, I'm really enjoying the podcast." So I was like, "Oh, nice. Okay, that's great." So it's nice to hear that feedback. You don't always expect that, but certainly they're enjoying it, especially from the regional and Canadian content aspect of it. That was particularly mentioned. They're just really liking to hear some things that are a little bit more homegrown.
Awesome. So how was what day did you go out? Because
I'm going to shock you here and tell you I played both Saturday and Sunday on the weekend. Just because I figured, you know what, when am I going to have a chance to play 2 days in a row in the summer? Chances are it's not going to happen. It was definitely a little moist, as most golf courses are, and a little bit soggy. First game was a little rougher, let's say, but there were certainly some good highlights, some good stuff as far as from the week. And the cool part is too, I went and I put my name down with a new member at our golf course, particularly knowing that he was a new member. And, we had some ties. I kind of knew who his sister was and stuff like that. But it gave me an opportunity to kind of welcome to the golf course, give him a sort of a lay of the land and stuff like that. And it made for a great game that way. And then on Sunday, I managed to play with one of my students who happens to be a member over at the same golf course as well. I don't teach there, but we got out to play a game, and that was a little bit more competitive. Obviously, playing with a young guy that's a +2 and headed to college in the fall.
You got to pull up your socks and get after
it. Yeah. Well, just focus a little more, and you just feel a little bit more comfortable. I mean, that first day out and making those swings, it's different swinging indoors to going outdoors, and especially on turf that's a little uneven and things like that. I will tell you though, by the time I was done Sunday night, my legs were whooped. Like it just, I mean, you think about that, it's not really that long of a walk, and you're used to doing it. I mean, I've golfed my whole life, but it's just getting back out there and doing that and not being used to it. It was definitely an Epsom salt bath kind of night after that one, for sure.
Well, walking 18 holes in the simulator certainly doesn't take as long, nor does it create the same amount of muscle wear and tear, does it?
Yeah, walking 10 feet to a screen is not really the same.
So much. I did actually hit a bunch of balls in the net on the weekend, so more than just a couple.
All right,
I did hit quite a few. Hit some wedges down to the little par 3 that we have in the backyard there, and it wasn't that bad.
You're gonna be ready for a game now. Now you got to make some plans.
I know there was a couple off the hosel. There's no question, but I'm known for that kind of thing with my wedges anyway. Anybody that's ever played around a golf with me knows that I'm good for 1 or 2 of those on a chip shot.
I will say I did shank one on Saturday on the first round, but it was more caused by I went to hit this little chip next to the green, and the guy I was playing with, all of a sudden he was to the right of me and I didn't see him at all. And then all of a sudden I sort of was down looking at the golf ball or whatever, getting ready to chip. And then as soon as I took my last look and was starting to swing, he kind of walks right in, almost right in front of me. So it was kind of like one of those little reaction things. And thankfully, a little Hosselhopper just, only went a couple of feet or whatever. And, there was no harm, no foul or whatever. But yeah, it was kind of disconcerting all of a sudden that, he was in front of me. But I thought of you as soon as I
flashbacks of Rivermead.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, look, we've got a really good show this week. We have some great discussions coming ahead on the front nine, some regional news, some discussion points and topics that I think people will be interested to hear about, things that we have up on flagstick.com right now. We also have on the back nine this week, we got a really interesting discussion we're going to have about the brands, golf brands, and how they shape golfers today. And I think that's going to be a really interesting listen for people, that are tuning in. So don't go into the clubhouse after the front nine. Stick around for the back nine for sure. And of course, Kevin Haim's going to be with us again, the Kevin Haim Golf School, and he's going to be talking with us a little bit about width of stance, kind of finding and figuring out what your width of stance in here. So that's all this week on the Flagstick podcast. So let's get right into it, Scott. Let's get into the front nine presented by Metcalf Golf Course. Looking for fun golf at a great rate? Save 15% when you prepay. Visit metcalfgolf.com to book. All right, Scott, let's dive into the front nine. And we had a few. We talked a little bit before we came on the podcast about the front nine stuff, and let's get into some of the news a little more regionally and talk about the Loyalist College.
Yeah, so just got notice this week that Loyalist College down in Belleville is actually going to start a golf program, a varsity golf program. If people are not aware, right now there's 10 schools in the OCAA that have varsity golf programs, and Loyalist has not had one. I will tell you, when I went to Loyalist 30 years ago, I remember meeting with the athletic director. At that time, golf was just sort of an exhibition sport, and they kind of had one tournament, and it wasn't really formal as far as a varsity sport. And I can remember the athletic director basically saying, "Hey, do you want to play golf for one event, or do you want to play volleyball all season long?" And it was a bit of a volleyball school, so I ended up playing volleyball. But one of the guys that I met there during those years was a guy named Jim Buck, who became the athletic director, and he's a bit of a golfer as well. So he's the guy who's been sort of looking forward to having a golf program at Loyalist. So what they're doing is they've got a coach, Mark Ray, who's a local guy who used to be the basketball coach there, but is heavily involved with golf. And so he's going to head the program. They're going to have a men's and women's program. And basically what they're going to happen for this year is they're going to be an exhibition sport for a season, and then they'll fully be involved as a member of the OCAA in 2023. So good opportunity there. The good part for that school is they do have a dome, which is set up for a driving range. So they do have an indoor practice facility. I have not heard yet where they're going to make their home as far as an outdoor facility for training or anything like that. That would be kind of in the fall. But it's nice to see some of the schools reinstituting or starting varsity golf programs.
Oh, that's awesome. It's good for students, because there's a lot of students that they go to a college, especially in Ontario, Canada, but in Ontario they focus more on the program that they want to take, even though they still have that sort of interest and aptitude for golf. They'd like to be on a golf team.
Yeah.
And sometimes maybe they're skewed towards going to one school over another because they want to kind of continue to pursue the collegiate golf side of things while still focusing on the primary goal, which is their education. So Loyalist is a great college. So for it to have a program like this it provides that opportunity for, or encourages, students to go to Loyalist that would normally want to go there anyway, but then they can still pursue their collegiate golf.
Yeah, they're really known actually for a pretty strong journalism program. Is one of their big programs. They have nursing programs, just a lot of different things that they have there. But those are sort of the key things. And I know over the years and talking to some, different golfers, they might not go there because they're like, okay, I can play golf at Georgian or Humber or whatever the case may be. I'll make the choice that way. So it's just nice to see, and I would expect we're going to see more of those in the future at other colleges.
Cool. All right. So tell me a little bit about this story that we have posted on the website right now called The Lost Golf Club.
Yeah, we there's an interesting thing in March 2020. Joe McLean did a little article on what was called the Hillcrest Golf and Country Club, and he basically found, while he was doing research, he found an ad for this golf course that was supposed to be built next to the Royal Ottawa Golf Club over in Hull, and it was in the early 1920s, and then sort of it disappeared. Basically, there was ads for it, and then there wasn't ads for it. So it was a little bit of a mystery of what sort of happened. And there was a lot of things like that over the years where, there was a prospective golf course and then maybe it didn't come to fruition, or maybe it did for a year and disappeared. But Joe was curious about it. And he happened to be having some discussions with a gentleman called Don Childs, who we've profiled on flagstick.com. Mm-hmm. And I encourage people to go and have a look at that. And Don is a retired professor, but a very avid researcher, and especially in the aspect of golf, and he's done some amazing work. And the neat part about Don is that you give him a little thread to pull, and Joe goes crazy.
I know. I was just going to say that.
Don goes really crazy or whatever. So what ended up happening here is Don ended up doing a lot of research on it, and actually created a 143-page booklet on this club, the history of it, the people behind it, what happened to it, every little aspect that you can possibly imagine, intertwined a lot of the history too of what was happening in the Hull, Quebec golf scene in the 1920s. And what was neat about this golf course, and I'll encourage people obviously go to the website and read through the book, but one of the things that they will see is that there was 5 prospective owners of this golf club. 2 of them were female, one of them was only 19. And it also involved having the mayor of Ottawa at the time as the president. Later on, the mayor of Hull was involved. There was all sorts of different, political wrangling, and so there's a lot of story to it, because obviously at the same time, Rivermead had already existed. There was other golf courses that were over there, like I said, the Royal, and it was next to it, the property. So it's an interesting tale, and Don definitely dug into it. So I'd encourage people to go and see it. We've got a link there on the webpage that you can go to Don's site to see some of his other work, which is amazing. But you can actually download the entire PDF on our website and have access to that. So thanks to Don for doing that and allowing us to kind of provide that for our readers.
God, can you imagine Don and Joe together?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. God. I mean, Don actually, here's a great example. He actually did a great story on a pro that was involved with the Napanee Golf and Country Club. And he actually did a 4-part, we'll call it an essay. You can call it a book if you want, because really it's book length, totaling almost 800 pages.
Wow.
Just delving. And the neat part for him is he takes it, all the twists and turns. He just doesn't gloss over something. He'll basically just go out on a tangent and explore. So for an example, the Hillcrest one, obviously it was a Stanley Thompson-designed, a 27-holer, and he winds in sort of the story of what was happening with Thompson at the time. He also gives you the history of those 5 people that were involved with that club, and not only at the time, but where their lives led afterwards of being involved with this project. So anybody that has any interest in history at all, or golf in the National Capital Region in Canada itself, Ian Stanley Thompson, for an example, it's definitely worth a read.
Wow. Okay, well, there you go. Check it out. Flagstick.com. You can find it there. And you'll also see a bunch of there's also a lot of other history related stories and stuff that we can post on the website that Joe has actually produced. That Joe around with us anyway, and I think most people know Joe know that Joe is a history buff. He's into his Hickory golf clubs, and he knows a lot about that stuff. He does the tours, to tournaments and stuff with his wife Paula, and they kind of enlighten people about that aspect of the game. But Joe's always doing these anniversary books for golf courses, that are having big anniversaries. He's always producing these anniversary books for them. And, this kind of stuff can be interesting to a lot of people. So, and you don't really know how interesting it is until you read it too. So you might find that this one really intrigues me, and I'm not the biggest history buff. I don't read a lot of historical stuff, a little bit, but this one really intrigued me. And I mean, myself, I'm definitely going to have a look at it. There's no question.
Yeah, we've got a rich history of golf in this country, and if that gets passed over and it disappears and we don't pay attention to it, it's going to be gone forever. And what's going to end up happening is that 50 years from now, people are going to be wondering, what was that about, or what was that about? So having people like Joe McLean, who's also the archivist historian for the Ottawa Valley Golf Association, and obviously does a lot of that same level of work with the PGA of Ottawa. That's important. That preserves that, because I can tell you, the number of times that I've had to, kind of tap into them, and I'm sort of that way too. Obviously, I've written a few history pieces or whatever, but a lot of times it takes a lot of collaboration to go back and find those details. And that if you didn't dig those up now, that somehow they're going to be lost, and you'll never know. You'll just end up being guessing at those.
Well, thank God for people like Joe and like Don and like yourself as well, that have an interest in the history, in the historical side of the game, and that want to find these things out and dig into them and write about them, even if they're only doing it for their own. Sometimes people do it for their own benefit, just because they want to know, and then they document it, and the next thing you know, it's out there for everybody, and now everybody can benefit from it. But not everybody is into that kind of thing, so not everybody's going to dive in as deep as it takes to really get the nitty gritty on it. So good job, guys. And thank you again, Don, for that. Scott, I want to bring up a topic, and I'll let you kind of handle this, because I know how close you are to the Underhill family. But we have some rather positive news to kind of update on Hayden Underhill, and I'll let you kind of get into it and tell a little bit about what happened and where things are at, because it's an extraordinary event, and it's an extraordinary story of what's going on.
Yeah, so 6 weeks ago, I think many people are aware, just because it did receive a lot of attention, but the University of the Southwest golf team, so they're based in Hobbs, New Mexico, and they were coming back from a tournament, and their team bus, just a van more than anything, was hit head on by another vehicle coming in the other direction. And unfortunately, on that bus, there was 8 students and a coach, and there was only 2 survivors. There was no survivors from the other vehicle as well. It was a head-on crash at high speed. And the 2 survivors were Dayton Price and Hayden Underhill. And Hayden's from Amherstfield, Ontario. Hayden obviously has played in the Flagstick Open. We've known Hayden for quite some time. Personally, I've worked with Hayden for, I think, 4 years now as his coach. And so you can imagine 6 weeks ago, when all of a sudden, the news came of this accident and what happened, and the fact that you all of a sudden have people that in ICU and not knowing what's going to happen. And I won't get too personal with the details, because that's not my place to share those things. But I can tell you it's been a very trying last 6 weeks for their family, but they've received amazing support. And I'll get to the good news right away, if people are not aware, that Hayden is now home. Dayton Price, unfortunately, is still having medical treatment in Texas, but hopes to be home soon. But Hayden came home last week. He's continuing his recovery and treatments and stuff up here, but he's in a walking boot. And I have not seen him yet. I am going to see him today, which is going to be a very emotional experience for me this evening. And that's just, my daughter was sick last week, so we obviously don't want to, get anyone else sick or things like that. But the fact that 6 weeks from being life flighted from a vehicle where 6 of your teammates and your coach died in this fiery crash, and to be in the situation that he was, and where he's come in 6 weeks is just a miracle. And that's the only way I can really describe it. And there's certainly been a lot of touch and go moments in the last little while, but thankfully there's been a lot of positives. And we're hoping that he can get back and return to the golf course at some point soon. Obviously not rushing to do that, but he's eager to. And so that's the good news aspect of it, that here we are 6 weeks later. Certainly didn't expect, after the phone calls and the communications of 6 weeks ago, that we'd be where we're at now. And I'm just proud of him more than anything. I mean, he's shown a lot of resilience, a lot of grit. He's had to undergo a lot in the last little while, and it's just nice to see him back. And I think people are just totally excited for him, and the fact that obviously he's on the road to recovery.
No, that is great news. And I know obviously we're not in a position where we want to get into a lot of the details of that. We're going to leave that up to the family to bring those things forward when the time is right. And at some point, hopefully we do get an opportunity to speak to Hayden and his family, maybe on this podcast, maybe just,
for sure,
in general. I mean, obviously you'll speak to him later today, but it's great to see that happening. And we wish all the best to Hayden and his family, and we wish all the best to Dayton and his recovery. It's going to be a process for both of them, for sure, but it's at least the positive side of it is kind of in the forefront now, and not so much the negative. So
and like I said, I personally have been able to thank a lot of people kind of on their behalf, because obviously they've been very occupied with what they've had to do with Hayden. And I know they're very overwhelmed by the amount of support in the community, from a personal level, fundraising level, GoFundMe, amazing support from people at manufacturers, Golf Ontario, Golf Canada. I mean, Lawrence Applebaum and their team there couldn't have been greater as far as the support that they've shown. Bob Weeks and the guys at TSN making mention of the boys and their GoFundMe during their Masters broadcast, taking the time to reach out and do that when they didn't necessarily have to, and making sure that these guys have the best chance possible to move forward with something positive in their life.
For sure.
Yep.
Okay. One other thing to kind of just mention here on the front nine is we got a profile story. I was speaking about Joe McLean earlier. Joe wrote a nice profile piece on a gentleman by the name of Lyle Alexander, and we have that posted up on flagstick.com right now. So why don't we kind of just shed a little light on that profile?
Yeah, it's more or less a catch up. Joe wrote a full profile on Lyle back in 2013, and what we want to do is a little bit of a follow up. And the remarkable part about the story, as you'll see, is Lyle's getting a little bit older, but still very active in golf. And you'll note how many times now he has shot his age, and I'm not going to give that up of how much it is, but it's a lot. And the number of club championships that he has compiled as well, and I think that's interesting. So if people want to hop on to flagstick.com and have a look at that, they will be surprised how many times he's shot his age or better. And I will tease that the number of club championships that he's won, either A class or seniors, is numbering close to 36. So that's how remarkable. And Lyle was a longtime referee as well with the OVGA, and a board member there as well. Very active in the national capital golf scene for many, many years at various clubs, Outaouais, Carleton, Mississippi, just a stack of them there, Greensmere. And I think people will be intrigued at what he's continuing to do, as he works his way into his senior career or through his senior career.
It's funny because Lyle is one of those players that if I look back, back to 1996 when I started, Flagstick magazine, and Lyle was one of the guys that was around then in the competitive scene, and he's always in the competitive scene. Like every leaderboard that I ever published, every story I ever wrote,
his name was always there.
It's either this tournament, that intersectionals, provincial, whatever. It didn't matter. It was Lyle Alexander, and I mean, it's been 26 years now that Flagstick has existed, and we're still talking about Lyle Alexander, not just as a guy in the golf world, but as a competitive golfer, still ultra competitive. 26 years later. And, it's not that he was 13 years old back then.
No, not at all.
I mean, so that's, that's awesome. And I mean, again, I mean, this is the kind of thing that Joe, jumps on top of as he sees these things and then he does the story and then, look what happens.
Yeah, well, Lyle had reached out just as a note. I guess he was mentioning to Joe something a little bit. He kept a spreadsheet of kind of his rounds and stuff like that. And I'm like, Joe, why don't you pull on that thread a little bit, And then, as he said, he'd already written a profile and 9 years ago in Lyle, and it's like, well, let's just do a little update and put it out there and provide some extra appreciation. And like you said, he's one of those guys that you go to type and you write the word Lyle, almost automatically Alexander goes after it. So it's one of the ones you have to spell check if somebody else's name Lyle that you might put that in there. So I mean, all the time you'd be talking to people and they'll mention somebody and they're like, well, have you heard of that person before? And you're like, yeah, I've written his name a lot over the years. So time. Yeah, for sure. So, but cool story to follow for sure.
Cool. All right, Scott. Well, I think that kind of wraps up the front nine, and for this week anyway. We're going to come back, and when we do, we're going to go see Kevin Haim on from the Kevin Haim Golf School, and we're going to see if Kevin can't help us out with the width of your stance a little bit, because it is individual and can be very unique to people. We're also going to dive into that how brands shape golfers on the back nine, but we got to take a quick break, pay some bills, and take a break and listen to something from our podcast sponsor, TaylorMade Golf Canada. We'll be right back.
Over the past 40 years, you've inspired us to make a lot of great drivers. All great, but all eventually reach their limit. But while we were making all these drivers for the present, we were also hard at work making the next generation of driver. Because where titanium ends, carbon begins.
All right, we are back with the back nine, presented this week by Golf Sim Gurus. Work on your game all year round in the privacy of your own home. Custom golf simulator setups built to your specs and to fit your budget. Visit golfsimgurus.ca to learn more. All right, Scott, we have an interesting topic of discussion on the back nine this week, and it's how brands shape golfers. And I guess we could start this discussion off by looking at the Twitter poll that you did, where you asked the question, does the brand of golf bag you use align with the brand of the majority of your clubs?
Yeah.
It's a fair question and an interesting question. 41% said yes. 59% said no.
Yeah.
So 40-60, it's still kind of split down the middle. I mean, yes, it leans a little more to no, but so where do we start with this topic, Scott? Because it's a very interesting one.
Yeah, and I think I think where we start with it a little bit is I guess introducing some of our own backgrounds in here, and in the fact that obviously marketing and advertising was part of your original college program that you went to. Marketing was part of the program that I took as well, and have taken several other marketing courses over the years. But marketing and branding has been a significant part of our discussions over the years. 26 years of, obviously, for Flagstick. Prior to that, when we work together in retail, there's a lot of discussions about how brands influence golfers and they shape what they do and what they think about products. And, this is not something that's a hot minute topic. This is something that we've seen progress and happen over the years, but I always find it intriguing. And this is why the question came up was, why do golfers, make the choices that they do, whether it's the golf course that they go to or the clubs that they choose. And, this was more focusing on the golf clubs and that decision, not of just buying the golf clubs, but, are they so influenced by the brand that, they end up matching their golf bag with their clubs, and that was sort of the question, which was really just a touch on the whole branding issue. So I think the first thing to maybe sit there and talk about a little bit is, that golfer and maybe what we see in observations of what, how golfers make those decisions. So, let's think maybe of when we were in retail, for an example.
Yeah.
And how golfers used to come in and ask for a particular brand and why, and because sometimes we would ask them why they were looking for a particular brand, right?
Yeah, I was going to say that, like, that's one of the things that I noticed, when we were working at the golf shop in Kingston there, years and years and years ago, is that someone come in and want, okay, I want a new set of irons. I'm looking for X.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So they come in the door and they automatically predetermined the brand of club that they want to buy. Yeah. Which to them, that's
how they choose.
I gotta have this. Like, that's how they choose. When we as professionals in the industry, even back then, when fitting was not, like, fitting for us was primarily a static fitting and not really so much a dynamic fitting. There was, we did have the ability to do with the swing mate from last week's show. We had the ability to do dynamic fitting, but we would look at it more from, okay, well, is that really the kind of club you need? Like, what type of player are you? What are you looking for? What kind of ball flight are you looking for? And we're trying to determine, whether you need an offset iron or a non-offset iron. Do you need something that's stainless or forged? And they're just like, nope, I gotta have this. So, what makes that, I guess, what influences that decision? I mean, we talk about marketing.
And here we have to also put it in context of time, because, in the 1990s, newspaper, television, radio, tour, totally different than what we have available to us now. I mean, there's obviously bigger channels to influence what a player or a person thinks now, or different ways to go about it than, what they saw then. So that's why I think it's easier to start back with the simplistic of the, form of the 1990s, when there was only a certain things of why people would make those choices. So, what did you hear in particular back then when people were making choices? What do you recall?
A lot of it was the golf magazines, because we didn't have Golf Channel. Initially.
It just started.
We didn't have golf on TV, was not as big as it is now. So we did, there were sports on TV, but it was primarily, even back then, the Masters was still only showing the front nine, or the back nine. So, in majors, it was still only 3 hours on a Sunday afternoon. So I think it was more what I heard was more of the golf publications back then, I don't mind saying Golf Digest, Golf Magazine.
Of course.
There was other ones back then too, but that's where the majority of that information was being put out there, because other than TV ads, which a lot of the manufacturers back then weren't buying TV ads because it was very expensive, and there's a lot of small companies in the industry back then. So the golf magazines was the high priority, or the golf retailers like us at the time, and the other local retailers at the time, whatever they put in their newspaper ad, or had on their radio commercials. But it was primarily the print marketing back then that was kind of the influence, because they would actually come in with the magazine in their hand, or they'd talk about the ad that they saw in the last issue, and there was a review on this. Yeah, like that's where I thought. What about you?
Yeah, no, it was the same. And I think one of the things was, there was always the referrals. There was
Mm-hmm.
always what their friends played or had or whatever, as far as knowing the brands. I don't think, and I think this is consistent all the way through. I think the exposure on things like tours and seeing tour players play particular equipment didn't drive people necessarily to say, oh, X player is playing this club. I want to play this club,
Mm-hmm.
with the exception of a few things, Nicholas winning the Masters in 86, obviously, big response to the Response ZT putter and McGregor, and
Yes.
they sold 600,000 of those or whatever. But in most cases, it was more because there was a prevalence of a brand. So that provided validation, and that still exists on the tour. But you might see players in some ways influenced by a hero. They wanted to copy what a player does. And you'll see that nowadays. I still see lots of young girls now that are playing, ping because Brooke does, right? So Brooke Henderson, right? Or whatever. But, it would be more overall picture more than anything. So back then, for an example, a Titleist or, Callaway was obviously buying TV commercials back then. And as you mentioned, it was expensive because there was only a limited amount of coverage, and it was on network TV. So it was prime time. It wasn't cable or stuff or things like that. So you're right. A lot of times people would come in and, just like you said, they know a particular brand. They come in and say, I want Tommy Armours, or I want this, or I want that. But they also, I would say, they weren't as educated as maybe people are now as well.
Oh, no
They didn't
question
know
about
as
that.
enough about the equipment because, again, as things have transitioned through the 2000s, 10s, into the 20s or whatever, and the internet, obviously, more information about products becomes more available, which in some ways can educate people, but also can confuse them.
I was going to say I was going to say
got negative sides too.
I think nowadays with the sheer amount of information that's available and the number of sources that information is available, where the information comes from, the source of that information plays a big part in the education process of the consumer too, because not every source that this information comes from is a reliable, or a knowledgeable source. There's lots of blogs out there. There's lots of stuff on the internet from people that are just, in some cases, just Joe average golfer that really doesn't know anything about what they're talking about with golf equipment or products, but they throw it out there because they're a golfer and they know something, and people buy into that information. Whereas there's more credible sources that, from industry people, even like ourselves, that have been in the business for years and make it our day-to-day routine to be aware of what products are out there. And even to the point where in some cases you try to almost know more than the people that, are, I'm going to say, more than the people that are selling the product. It's almost becomes kind of like I have to know because I'm putting this online. I'm putting this on the internet, and if I put it on the internet and I'm just spewing out,
you're
for lack of a better term, I'm spewing out marketing material. That's fine, but the marketing material is there to serve a purpose too. It's not always the deepest component of it. That's why the consumer relies on people like ourselves and other people that have been in the industry a while and pride themselves on their knowledge of the products to bring them the more in-depth information than what they see or hear in an ad.
Yeah, I mean, marketing is always the sort of the entry point. It's the way to entice people in. So if we look back at, that retail situation or whatever, a person comes in, they have a particular interest in a brand, that's sort of the stepping stone. And that's the hard part for manufacturers, is to sort of, draw the eyeballs to get people interested enough that they'll follow up on that.
Right.
Then another aspect of marketing is actually what the follow through is on that. And that's where you're talking about a little bit too. There's things that happen very, acutely, that it's just happens and happens. But if things are happening on a consistent basis and people start to trust a brand. So for an example, if they have a great experience with a brand, maybe they've had a good customer service experience, or, a retailer or a golf course, whatever the case may be, or even for ourselves, you have to build that reputation over time, and you have to be consistent and honest of what's happening there. And if you are, then you build brand equity. And I think when we talk to golfers and why they all of a sudden, will buy that golf bag that, goes with the clubs that they have, it's not always a case of, oh, I want to match. It's because, I've had brand X. I like their golf clubs, so I trust the brand to buy the golf bag. And it's not going to be the same for every single one.
No.
But there's lots of lessons to be learned there within the industry and so forth about, how you can influence people.
Yeah.
But it's not, unfortunately, because the barriers are so easy now with digital aspects and platforms, to just kind of throw something out there. But if you don't follow it up and you're not consistent over time, you're not really building the brand equity.
Well,
right.
And the other thing I think with the, when you talk about the relationship between the equipment that somebody plays and the bag that they have when they're matching like that.
Right.
I think that it's almost like a pride thing. When you like your equipment, when you like your irons, or you like your let's say you have the same irons, woods, wedges, and putter in your bag. Yeah. And you've made that decision to play that equipment because of whether it's your long-term experience, whether it's, going back to, your father played that brand, and your brother plays that brand, and your uncle plays that brand. So you play that brand and you like the brand. Well, then putting those clubs in that golf bag with that brand on the side of it is almost like you are saying to everybody that you play golf with, I'm a ping guy, or I'm a TaylorMade guy, or I'm a Titleist guy. Like, this is my brand. I'm proud to have those clubs in my bag, which is great for the manufacturers, because that's what they say when they talk about their equipment. They love the equipment that they're playing. Now, they're also quick to possibly dump the bag if they decide that they're going to not be so loyal anymore. But that's what I find. I mean, at least, for me, carrying a bag that matches my equipment would be about showcasing the fact that that's the clubs I play. Kind of like a tour pro doing it for sponsorship. Like, it's part of, it's a sponsorship thing. They're an ambassador for that product. As an amateur, you're not getting paid to play the equipment, but you have that same sort of pride of, I'm carrying the bag. This is my brand.
This is my brand. And the thing is, within there, people making that decision, I mean, some of that's influenced, or used to be influenced, by tour, where a tour player would have one brand throughout their bag. But, in talking about different companies also make a decision too of who they want to be and how they want to be recognized. And you see that carry through in their marketing, whether people think they're affected by it or not. They put a particular focus on certain things. So, Ping, for an example, puts himself out there as an engineering company. TaylorMade, their whole mantra is a leading edge sort of company. Titleist was, the serious golfer. They all have their own little angles, and that influences generally who gets attracted to them. And, they'll live and die by those particular things. They'll adapt that maybe over the years, but you'll also see they'll be fairly consistent with that. So if a player identifies with a brand and say, oh, that's the edgy brand, I want to be the edgy player. PXG comes on the scene, and they're a premium. They got a sort of their own little angle to it, or whatever. That may appeal to somebody's personality. And that makes them go for it. Whether there's enough market there with those particular factions that can last over a long time, that's hard to say. But it's always fascinating when you go and you talk to golfers and say, why did you choose those particular clubs? That said, I will say nowadays we are now starting to see more of an agnostic age. We are starting to see, although we generally will see a lot of bags that if all of a sudden somebody's got TaylorMade irons, they've got TaylorMade woods. We're starting to see more people, because of the influence of fitters and education and going against what we saw in the 1990s. Where now people are going to go, oh, I'm going to come in there what's the best clubs for me? And it doesn't necessarily come from, one brand. And yes, you can have lots of options within a particular brand that could probably come close if a person wanted to play a particular brand. But, people have to understand that, they might come from different manufacturers to get the best possible mix. And that's going to be a really particular golfer, but that's certainly changing a little bit more. That said, it still influences people. You'll still see people make a decision, between two products, and they're like, yeah, that one really works for me, but and it happens on tour. Even like, I've heard stories from fitters where all of a sudden they go, yeah, we worked for 2 hours with that player, got that shaft just right, but they didn't like the color because it wasn't their college. It was against it was their college enemy team or whatever like that. So, but yeah, it's interesting as far as those trends and how players choose to play what they want to do.
Well, I remember back when we were doing it was a magazine, but I mean, our good buddy Chad Hollington, who's no longer in the golf industry, but we still keep in touch. But Chad was a representative for McGregor,
right?
Back then, which was, but the company, the brand of the company, McGregor, was making a resurgence into the industry,
right?
And their whole concept with McGregor was bringing back the old, bringing back the hand, it was the heritage of the company, the heritage of the company. It was, they were showing their marketing materials was all the black and white, and it was all showing the craftsmanship of the product.
Right. And we've seen that from Hogan over the years. We've seen that from Wilson, where they talked about
that appeals to
majors.
That's the opposite of what some companies do, where they're on the leading edge, the cutting edge of technology. And it's like, this is the latest and greatest, the metal material or the material we're using to build the club.
Well, some of them are forced into that because they don't have the heritage, right? So that's the hard part, is if they don't have that history, they have to make their own history and see how that influences the golfers. Of, they'll come out and, hey, we're better than everyone else, we're doing it differently, we're doing it this way or whatever. So while there's certainly technological innovations, and we see them all the time, and that's one thing I should say, we do have players or people all the time that, they'll look at stuff online, they'll see a picture of a club and they'll poo-poo it right away because they're like, oh, it's just the same old club and they've repainted whatever. No. That's not the case. I can guarantee you.
Repainted it. Come on.
Believe me, had enough discussions, and you can listen back and look through all our content or whatever. So many discussions with engineers and so forth. And engineers are about performance. That's what they're after. They'll leave the marketing to the marketing people, who obviously have to put their own spin on it. But certainly the engineers are trying to push and push and push and push and push. So you're right. Brands have to make those decisions. So like McGregor did, they're like, man, we've got this heritage, we should dive into this. And what they're doing there is they're basically showing, here's all these good things that have happened in the past. We have all this goodwill. We have all this equity. You should believe that because we already have this history that's there. So again, that sort of shapes the brands and who it appeals to, because somebody's going to be, maybe they're nostalgic. And as you said, my dad played that. My grandfather played that brand. I trust that brand, right?
I'll even go further with I like this topic. I'll even go further with the marketing side of things. If we go back to when Adam's Tight Lies was released, and their whole marketing campaign, their whole marketing premise was based around the infomercial. It wasn't ads in the magazines. It was all based on the infomercial, and they built a massive following for this fairway wood. Nothing else at the time. Other stuff came later, but the fairway wood, and people bought into that. Now, this is not, there's a lot of infomercials on products out there, and that we could kind of poke fun at a little bit if we wanted to. Is like how good are they actually? But in this case, the Tight Lies, this was a good club.
Well, it solved a problem for people, right? Which is always really what it comes down to when you're a retailer, when you're a fitter, when you're doing marketing, whatever, you're trying to solve a problem for the consumer. And if you can solve that problem for them, they're all in.
But it was a different channel of marketing
right.
in the industry at the time, and people jumped on top of it, and
Yeah.
and it was very successful for them. So there's another thing that, from the standpoint of brand influencing people's buying decisions through
Yeah.
marketing. It's not that the product was not a good product, it's just that the channel of marketing that they used was very
Yeah.
different,
Yeah.
and it elevated very, very quickly. So
Well, I think the cool thread that's pulled out of that, which is maybe one of the last big things that we can talk about
Okay.
here or whatever, is that what ends up happening there is that people end up having a positive experience. And this would happen at a golf course. This would happen with everything that you actually have. And you build trust
yeah,
with the consumer. And once you build that trust, you're in a much better position to actually influence them,
yeah,
which sort of takes me and leads me to what is happening nowadays with so many channels being split all over the place within social media, and each actually having the common word influencers out there, which is kind of funny because, I've been going through and, I recently read a study at the Journal of Retailing and Consumer Services, and that actually exists, people. They're actually real studies, real scientific studies working on this stuff and talking about social media and influencers and so forth. And trust is the biggest issue that comes up in there. And I notice when I'm looking across different things, and we're very cognizant about our brand with Flagstick of doing the right thing, not the fast thing, not the thing that's going to grab easy money or whatever the case may be. It's doing the things that build trust. And while that's frustrating at times, because obviously some people will be, they'll be vulnerable to, oh, hey, that sounds exciting, that'll solve the problem for me, and they spend money on that. We've realized that it's a long-term thing that you're going to do. So what I see now is people that are maybe influenced a little bit by something that's social media. So we'll see, for an example, we'll talk to somebody who's in marketing, in travel. I remember talking to a guy who tried to make use of, some influencers, is the way it was. What he realized quickly, though, is that there were different segments within the influencer category. There was people that were actually, they would influence it, and we can call ourselves influencers because we've been doing this for a long, long time. There is the aspect of where things were a lot more organic, a lot more natural, and people had trust in those people, and they saw what they did, and they were more liable to be influenced by that person long term. The other side of it is there'd be a lot of people that all of a sudden there were influencers, and you see that all of a sudden they promote something, but they do it purely for the money. And then next thing you know, and I saw this recently, and I had to actually mute one of these influencers within their content. Every single post or every single story or whatever was pushing something, but what they pushed changed. Like, so within one category, for an example, say it's outerwear, say it's like within a 9-month period, they had 3 different outerwear companies that were the best. Well, guess what? The trust is gone.
Yeah.
Because people then begin to recognize that, they're doing it purely for the money, that it's not actually authentic. And while you may catch a few flies in that, you may catch a few people in that, consumers or manufacturers and companies start to begin to realize that, we need greater amount of credibility that's in there. And if the credibility is not there over time, then you basically lose credibility as a company because you're using that avenue that doesn't have any credibility. And all of a sudden, people are not going to buy those golf clubs or buy that shirt or whatever, because they're going to all right, if that's the way they're going to do their marketing, then I'm not going to believe in that, because they're obviously doing something that's a little bit more fleeting, and they're just doing it for the sake of making a sale.
Well, that's the thing. Trust. I mean, we can end on this, that trust is a very, very powerful tool. But heaven forbid you do anything to create distrust with your brand. Totally. Because that is so difficult to rebound from once you've lost the trust of your consumer, lost the trust of your audience in our case. Then it's very hard to regain that trust. It takes a lot more work to get it back than it did to get it in the first place. Yeah. So 100%.
Yeah. You've got to be authentic, and, trust is an emotion, and it's something that is very, as you said, very, very valuable. And you have to make all your decisions based on maintaining that and not doing something to disturb it. And if you do something to disturb it, you've got to be accountable for it
Own
right
it
away.
quick.
Own it quick. If you do
Yeah.
not own that,
Yeah.
and we've seen that within manufacturers, golf courses, golf businesses of any kind, if they own it quickly, that actually leads to more trust and more credibility.
Yeah.
It's when you try to kind of sweep it under the rug that it becomes a bit of an issue. So, I'd love to hear from, some of our listeners about, their decisions as well. Why do they play the equipment that they do? In some cases, it may be the trust. It may be the trust in the fitter or the person that's selling it to them. So they're transferring that trust to the reputation from, that fitter to say, I trust them. They're going to give me the best equipment possible. It's not about the brand of the equipment. So, but we'd love to hear from those people of why you choose to do what you do within golf. Why do you buy the golf shoes that you do? Why do you buy the golf bag you do? Why do you go to the golf course that you do? Why do you get the golf equipment that you do? I mean, it'd be great to hear how they think about it too.
Yeah.
Like now, does this open up something to them in their brain? They go, oh, I didn't really think about why I trust that particular brand. So it would be great to hear from people of what they think on the topic.
Cool. I like that. I like the whole conversation. We could go on for quite a long time, but it certainly is an interesting conversation, and it's one that truly, it has no right or wrong answers to it. That said, the brands that we choose might play with some aspects of your actual game, but fixing your swing is something that can help you lower your scores and play more consistent golf a little bit more than just the equipment that you play. So with that in mind, it's time for another weekly swing fix here on the Flagstick podcast. It's time to hit the lesson tee, brought to you by the Kevin Haim Golf School. It's always the right time to play better, whether you need private lessons, a better short game, some putting help, or even a custom club fitting. Visit kevinhaim.com and remember that better golf is a lot more fun. This week, Kevin speaks about figuring out the proper stance width for your golf swing. Check this out.
Okay, golfers, time for another lesson here, and today we're talking about width of stance. I think the most important thing about width of stance is that it's consistent once you find what's right for you. And as you can see with this alignment stick at my feet, I've done exactly that. I've also done it for consistency in teaching at our golf school, but I've marked this alignment stick with a piece of white tape for my lead heel, and then my trailing foot, the white tape is wedges, short irons, then the yellow for the mid iron, the red moves into hybrids and long irons, and then the driver is the green. So when I'm practicing, I've always got a consistent base, which really has an effect on timing and how I move. Now here's the lesson really though. You have to find your proper width of stance. There is a little bit of allowance for different body types and swing shapes to set up how wide or narrow they want their stance to be. Here are the only conditions I want you to be careful of. If your stance in golf is too wide, and I know I'm exaggerating, but you need to see this a little bit. When I have a wide stance, which I see a lot in bigger, stronger guys, they want to get really wide and stable. But what happens is I can't get my weight from foot to foot now. So I'm kind of stuck in the middle. I also can't turn very well, so I may block the shot and not get up onto my lead leg. So too wide a stance has a series of problems. Too narrow a stance allows for too much shimmy shake like a skier, and we get to the outside of our legs, and then we're swaying and moving around and tilting and changing spine tilt and angle, and that's not good either. Now, a narrow stance will allow for more rotation. A wide stance will allow for more stability. So it's up to you to practice a little bit, make sure you're stable, but you can still turn, still move from foot to foot, and once you find that width of stance for you, set your own alignment stick with some marking so you're consistent and you become a consistent ball striker.
Well, as always, thank you, Kevin, for that. Width of stance. I know I tend to have myself a little bit wider stance.
You do.
I'm one of those people that my golf swing is such that I tend to move off the ball a little bit. And if I don't have a wide enough stance, I end up getting on the outside of my right, for a right-handed golfer, I end up getting my weight on the outside of my right leg. As opposed to being able to keep it on the inside of my right foot. And then if it gets outside, then, I mean, as a golf professional, Scott, and anybody out there that is a golf professional knows if the weight rolls on the outside of your right leg, you're in a whole lot of trouble.
Yeah, I mean, that width of stance is super, super important. It influences a lot of things, mobility of how you move as far as your body. It influences the path, and it also influences the low point as far as the golf clubs. There's a lot of things that can happen there. So, having that consistency of what works for you is certainly important. And, I like how Kevin does that, that simple method as far as you to find what works for you, and then you can be consistent with that, because obviously if you can take out as many variables as possible within your golf swing, it can help you have more predictable results.
Beautiful. Well said. Well said.
Well,
all right. Well, the Masters is in the books. Major one on the PGA Tour is in the books. And obviously, we get up for the majors. That's as golfers and as golf enthusiasts, that's what we do. We get up for the majors. And, my favorite major personally of all of them has always been the Open Championship. I don't know if it's just, getting back to the roots of golf or what it is, or the courses that they play just kind of interest me a little bit more. But with the 150th Open Championship set for this summer, there are many ways that people will be commemorating the 150th Open Championship. And let's take a look at one item that you'll be able to purchase this year in this segment of Product Watch, brought to you, of course, by Greensmere. Save 40% on all daily green fee rates with FlexPass for only $425 plus tax. Visit greensmere.com for more info and to get your FlexPass. All right, Scott.
Yes, sir.
We got a book to talk about, a book on Product Watch. What is this book?
Yeah, we obviously, as you mentioned, the Open's going to be very important this year, being the 150th. Hasn't quite been the same the last couple of years, but this year they return back to St. Andrews. They're expecting, and you'll see if you go into flagstick.com, there's expecting a record crowd, 290,000 people for the week. They had 1.3 million applications for the ballot. And the RNA, who runs the Open, is actually got a commemorative book that they're going to put out. Now, we should say it's a pre-order right now, because they want to include some of the elements of the Open in it. So it's going to be published in August, although they do have the Audible version of it. The audio version will be coming out in May, but it's basically a book, 320 pages is expected, and it's $60 American, actually Canadian, and it's going to celebrate the 150 years and talk about the whole history of the Open, take it from the start to the finish, not only the players as well, but other elements like the caddies, the greenkeepers, the courses. It's going to have different stories, all the different characters of the Open, great photography, and it's just a nice way to put something on the bookshelf if you're going to buy that print version, and it might be a nice gift as well. I mean, being available in August, it might be something that people will think about as you head to the fall and the holiday gift season. And I know I'm going to definitely order a copy. They've got Ian Carter working on that with the RNA, and having the resources of the RNA behind it makes it even better. It's hard enough as a researcher or somebody that's independent to try to get as much information as possible, but when it's actual the RNA who runs the Open, providing the resources and putting it behind it, it's going to be the most comprehensive book possible. So pretty excited to see that one for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I was checking it. The cover of it looks pretty cool. It's definitely definitely make for a really good coffee table book. That's for sure. Conversation piece for the golf enthusiast out there to have sitting in their den or in their living room for people to look at. The cover is really kind of cool.
It's one of those majors that I know for myself that are definitely still on my bucket list to get to. We're fortunate, obviously, that we've been to St. Andrews and walked the property extensively and spent a fair bit of time there in the town. And we know how special it is. And, to have everybody there for that Open Championship. And like I said, if you think how crazy it was, I think 2000, when Tiger won the Claret Jug for the first time, that was the record attendance previously at 239,000.
Wow.
So you're going to have another 60 or 50,000, good math today, another 50,000 people in town for that. So it's just going to be a wild scene for sure. And so, yeah, it'll be nice to get this book, and it's called Celebrating 150 Years of the Open Championship. It's by Ian Carter and the RNA. And you can do pre-sales on now and available. And then, as I said, the Audible, so 9.5 hours long as far as the Audible. It'll be available on Kindle as well, and that'll be available in May.
Cool. Well, keeping in, this doesn't happen very often, but since we have a little self-serving interest here, a little personal side of it, in keeping with the product watch topic, we have a special limited edition product that we have been working on during the off season.
Yep.
And designed, and finally they have been made, and they are on their way to our offices. I do have one the sample that we had made, which is basically, this is what it's going to look like. But
yeah, you haven't shipped that to my house yet?
No, it's staying right here, buddy, right here. But we decided to kind of dive into some merchandise this year, and this was our first go at it to see how it was received, and in keeping with sort of the rebranding of Flagstick and rebranding of the company and entering into some different things and we've had people who have asked about Flagstick branded product before, but we just didn't want to kind of put stuff out there like our corporate stuff with our logo.
Yeah, we've done some hats before. Yeah. We did some sweaters and stuff back in the day, but it was mostly staff. I know the hats sold really, really well back in the day. In fact, I still see people wearing.
Yeah, I know some too faded, some a little more faded than others.
There's always those ones where you see them and like, do I have a new hat I can give them to get that off their head?
So we went ahead and designed about 6 or 8 different designs for a head cover. This is for those watching, you'll be able to see this. For those not watching and listening, you're going to have to go to the website to see it. But this is our new product.
I like it.
This is the limited edition Flagstick head cover. You'll see the new Flagstick logo right here, and the new icon logo right here. Cool. For those that are looking, online. Now, here's the scoop with this head cover. There are very limited quantities of this available. We did not go mass produce 2,000 of these head covers and gonna warehouse them up in my garage until it takes us 2 years to sell them all through. There are a very small limited amount of these available. They are going to be selling on our website as we're going to be releasing these. I'm hoping that we're able to release these at the time that this podcast is released, that they'll be available on flagstick.com. And they're going to be selling for $49.95.
Okay.
And that does not include taxes and shipping. With taxes and shipping, it is going to be, I believe, about $65. Taxes and shipping included. And right now, what we're going to be doing on the website is we're going to be taking pre-orders because what we ordered has not arrived yet. They will be arriving very, very soon. And what we're hoping to do is when we receive all of the pre-orders, we're going to ship everything out hopefully by May the 15th. That's the
cool.
So we've got basically about 2 weeks between now and maybe 3 weeks between now and May 15th to take in the pre-orders. So like I said, there's not going to be that many available. Get your order in as quickly as possible. So if you visit flagstick.com, you'll see it right on the front page. We'll create a spot where you can just click, go to the page. You fill out, there's a link there to a form that you have to fill out. It's basically a pre-order form. You fill out the pre-order form, and then you'll have to e-transfer your product cost, $65 to us. And we're doing it all this way because this is a new venture for us to dive into. We don't want to get into setting up a big e-store right now for the sake of one product, because then we're just starting to drive the cost of these products up and up and up. So we're trying to do it so that we can keep these products inexpensive but still, it's a really nice product. It's a synthetic leather. It's not real leather, but it looks very much like real leather. It's going to last for a while. It's nice, the soft sort of velvet interior to it to protect your club, and a cool design too. Like I said, we went through about 6 or 8 different designs. This is the one that we ended up picking that we liked the best, and so we had them made. So visit flagstick.com. If you're interested in something like this, there won't be very many of them available.
No, act quickly. Yeah,
they're going to go pretty quick, I think.
We had a small quantity made a few years ago just for our players in our Flagstick Open tournament, and we had a great response to those. I still see them all over the place. So it's certainly been something that's been asked for a while. Mm-hmm. Lots of people are certainly requesting merch, wondering, what do we have? Do we have anything available? Nice and easy, because a lot of people now obviously neutral with their head covers. They like their head covers, like to put something on their bag. But like you said, in making a little bit more limited edition, it's not like everybody is going to have one for sure. No. So if you do want one, you definitely have to get that pre-order in pretty quickly. I know I'm going to have to fill out that form pretty fast, right? Is this how this works?
You can fill out the form if you like. I think that we will kind of be able to look after ourselves a little bit. It is kind of important Good that we have one, but I'll try to hold one off for you. I appreciate that. They sell through pretty quick. So
all right, I appreciate it.
So that's our shameless plug, I suppose, this week on the show, on the podcast. But that wraps it up for us for another episode of the Flagstick podcast. We have to thank our sponsors, Metcalf Golf, Golf Sim Gurus, Greensmere Golf and Country Club, Kevin Haim Golf School, and of course our presenting sponsor, TaylorMade Golf Canada. Check out the new Stealth line of golf equipment at taylormadegolf.ca, and welcome to the carbon wood age. Hopefully you're enjoying everything that you're hearing and watching on the podcast. Be sure to follow us across all of the social media networks, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Subscribe to us on Spotify, Audible, and judging from the continued popularity, Apple Podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Lots of stuff on the YouTube channel that you obviously do not see on the audio version. Make sure that you like us. Click on that notification bell to make sure you never miss a single episode when it drops. Get over to flagstick.com. As always, more amazing content there, and to pre-order your Flagstick limited edition Flagstick head cover. Great content delivered there on flagstick.com every single day. Once again, so sad that it has to end, but it'll happen again next week. I am Jeff Botter.
And I'm Scott McLeod.
Always remember, go for the stick.